Okay, well now it's time to talk about the 2020 5th Annual Great Ontario Yield Tour. My name is Moe Agostino, Chief Commodity Strategist with Farms.com Risk Management. I'm here with Greg Stewart, Chief Agronomist with Maizex, and we're about to release the 2020 Ontario soybean yield. But before we go there, I just want to thank everybody that participated in the tour. The tour was from August 17th to 28th this year. And that little map in the middle there on the slide is mine and Greg's PR tour. Looks a little messy, probably not that efficient. Doesn't look like I came back, but anyways, it got done. Thank you to all the hosts, all the sponsors that participated, all the team leaders, scouts, including all the farmers that invited us on their farm. Now Greg's going to take it away and talk about some of the top observations and release the 2020 soybean yield.
Thanks, Mo. So first up, we'll talk about the stands. I think it's fair to say that across the province, we had very consistent soybean stands, very few holes in fields, not many wet holes. Yeah, we still had some challenges with diseases in places and spider mites and other spots, but overall, I think this is a very consistent soybean crop. Stands were pretty consistent. If you want to talk plants per acre, we ended up across more than 350 fields, 142,048 plants per acre. Now that's a little bit lower than last year. Last year was the highest number we'd ever seen, but of course that was because we planted late. Everyone pushed their populations a bit higher. This at 142,048 is a very solid soybean stand for a population count. As I mentioned earlier, limited disease. I think specifically we would talk about white mold, even in areas where white mold is almost a consistent problem, and where some years it is a yield robbing problem. White mold was down, not absent completely, but certainly down from where we've seen in previous tours. And then I guess we'd make the comment that weed control, I think generally we'd say that weed control is above average in soybean fields across the province this year. So when we talk about pod counts, we all realize that August rains are key to getting those pod counts up. And although maybe August rains weren't perfect for everyone, pretty decent rainfall across most areas really enhanced pod count, and you would notice it and certainly in those top 3 or 4 nodes where good rainfall in August generated much better pod counts at the top of the plants. And there's a shot of one of our stops. Average pod count this year was 35 pods per plant. Last year, we had a pod count across the same tour of 28 pods per plant. So up significantly, not quite as high as some of the record yields like in 2018, but still 35 pods per plant, really solid number in terms of a pod count. If you summarize that a little bit, in 2020, our plant count's 142,000. Again, like I mentioned earlier, down a little bit from last year, but pod count up 35 versus a 28 last year, so significantly up. All of that comes together to give you our estimated bean yield for the province of 53.2 bushels per acre. And if we can get to 53.2, that would be a record bean yield across the province relative to where we've been over the last few years. I've got a slide that summarizes that in just a minute. There's the geography in terms of regions across the province. You can see some of those numbers. One of the most interesting numbers is Eastern Ontario. Tomorrow when we talk about corn yields, we'll be somewhat disappointed in Eastern Ontario's corn yields because of low rainfall, but the bean yields actually hung in pretty well. And of course, big beans down in the Southwest, looking at a regional average of 57 bushels per acre. And those are the numbers on individual counties. You'll be able to view those at your leisure when you can see them a little better. And some of the highlights. So I I stared for quite a while at the Ottawa County, Ottawa region bean numbers, left it at 66 bushels per acre. My phone will probably be ringing on that one, but that's where the numbers came in. Chatham-Kent, 61, that's a big bean yield. And quite interesting, up in the Northlands, so what I'm calling Northlands, Huron County and Bruce County, pretty big bean yields coming out of those counties based on our estimates from the tour. If you compare this to where we've been on the tour in the past 5 years, well, clearly we're calling for a record yield in terms of this Great Ontario Yield Tour projection of 53.2, up from our numbers of previous year, as you can see them on this slide. And relative to Agricor, we'd have to go back to 2018 to see a 53 bushel yield in 2018 from Agricor. I think we're there in terms of being real close to that number in this 2020 bean yield. So back to you, Mo, to finish her up.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Well, again, wanted to thank all the team leaders and scouts on tour, including some of the dogs we followed that provided us the pathway to get into some of these fields to do the yield checks. Great job. Well done, everyone. I'll briefly talk about market impact with this record soybean yield. So again, in the morning session, when I did the 2020-21 US and global soybean outlook, I mentioned that maybe your biggest risk going into 2021 is basis. And again, this is an Ontario presentation. Largely that's geared towards that Ontario producer, but and this is a Ontario soybean elevator basis chart. And so you can see when the dollar hit the 5-year low in that mid-March COVID-19 fear selling mode, soybean basis for new crop got up to about a 305 per bushel flat price, or sorry, 305 per bushel basis. That was local elevator. The end user was probably a slight bit higher than that. Since then, the dollar has rallied about 13.2%. It's at almost 77 cents, which is near the 2020 highs. And that basis on beans has come off. It's probably off about 50 cents. So that was the opportunity to do basis. Historically, it was high. We took advantage of it, got aggressive. We were hoping to get beans in the teens. But the only way I thought we could do that, it was to lock in the basis first and then risk on futures, hoping for $10 soybean futures. And it almost looks like we might just get that. So based on the total acres and this projection of record soybean yield, production's going to be, again, it's going to climb from last year. Not going to be quite a record in terms of total supply in the province, but we're going to have plenty of it to go around as we enter 2021. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you again for joining us. If you want to see all the photos and all the videos that we did during the tour, just go to Twitter at Farms Marketing is the main Twitter account, or just use hashtag ONYield20 and you can go back and look at what we did on tour. We will now open it up to questions. Denise will gather all the questions, and we'll be available at the e-booths as well. So Greg can answer questions at the Maizex booth, or I'll answer questions at the Farms.com risk management booth. Once again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.